All right, everybody, we are back. Another episode of the Habitat Podcast. Brian, what's going on, buddy?
Happy sweet November, buddy. Doing well. Just enjoying this time of year, trying to soak it all in before it blows by us like usual.
Yeah, like October just did.
Exactly.
I got to spend a couple days down at camp with you in Ohio. I'm on my way home right now, actually driving down the road, recording this. So that's kind of a first for the podcast. Hopefully, I did some testing earlier. It sounded pretty good. But yeah, I had a good time with you down there, bud. Too bad we didn't arrow anything yet, but the month is still young.
Yeah, it seemed like the mature bucks are kind of right at legal shooting time. They're making their moves early and late, but should be breaking open anytime soon here, hopefully.
Rock and roll. And I know you guys are going to have a fun, probably next week, I'd say is going to be awesome. But we have a special guest today. Kurt, welcome to the show. I want you to pronounce your last name for me so I don't screw it up.
Caramanidis. It's Greek, half Russian, but the name is Greek.
Awesome. Well, hey, welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate it. You guys are great. I've learned a lot on your podcast, so I'm very happy to be here. If I can provide any value, that would be great.
Well, first off, we love that you listen. Thanks for being a loyal listener for so long and for participating in the Habitat chat and all that comes with that. But first of all, congrats on the buck you shot recently, mister. That is a stud.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm in a very high. I didn't shoot that off my new Freedom Acres property. I shot it off the place we've been hunting for over 35 years. And it's, I know you're in Michigan, it's highly pressured. We've been leasing 40 acres of swamp. So not much you can do with what we had, plus we leased it. So heavily hunted. So when I can get a good buck like that, it's not frequent. Many years I don't even have one that I would shoot. But just enjoy still to get out. So yeah, that's not a common occurrence where we hunt. So I was pretty happy. It was 14 points. It was not a giant, but it was a beautiful buck for where we hunt for sure.
And you said Michigan.
No, I'm in central Wisconsin, but I'm saying it's relatable to your pressure.
Oh yes,
I think that you guys have in Michigan because I'm not sure about Brian as far as his hunting pressure, but we just have a lot of hunting pressure where we are. So many people can relate to that. I don't have some dream, 100, 200, 500 acre place that's just perfect for everything. It's you got to work for it hard.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't think you were from Michigan. And I'm like, did I miss that detail? Because that's a heck of a buck that's from Michigan. But 14 points. And when you texted me the other day, I was like, holy wow, that's a heck of a deer.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. And the thing with that buck, they just started moving more randomly now that we've had a hot doe or two. So it's a lot tougher now. That was Saturday. It was a little bit warmer, but they were still in there. Go check a scrape. You could hunt a pattern. And now I've been hunting with my dad, and he almost got a big one that same morning, which would have been unbelievable for archery in the same 40. That would have been crazy. But now they've become more random. They're chasing does, and it's, as you know, a little bit trickier than when that late October. They're still, to some extent, patternable, where you can kind of work, downwind of a scrape and that kind of thing. So he came in 150 yards downwind of a scrape. I was about 70, but I had just enough pitch of the wind, barely, where I thought I was cooked, where he was coming on a straight line and then just ducked in front of me 12 yards. And fortunately, maybe a 6 seconds, he was expired, which for me is very important.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, congrats again, Brian. I'm not sure if you saw that buck yet, but look Kurt up and check it out. It's a heck of a deer. I know. How we normally start these, as you know, Kurt, let's hear about who you are, where you're from, what you do for a living, if you'd like to go down that path, and just paint us a picture of who we're listening to today.
Sure. Born and raised in central Wisconsin. I actually grew up in Green Bay till I was 12. So I'd go to Packers kids picture day and all that kind of stuff. Not far from Lambeau Field, actually, which was kind of cool. Some of the Packers lived not far from us. I've been hunting and fishing since I could function, and moved to central Wisconsin, which is right in between Milwaukee and Green Bay. If you dead in between, Fond du Lac is the biggest city in between. So I'm East Central Wisconsin. Graduated from Marion College there. Have been in sales before joining the investment advisor stockbroker arena 23 years ago, excuse me. Time flies. So I've been doing that ever since, and that gives me some flexibility. In the fall, I don't take a lot of vacations. My wife and I will go on a vacation, but otherwise I save it for the fall, and then I get some flexibility there. And like I said, I've been hunting highly pressured swamp, so I don't come from where I've had this awesome place forever. So things that we're going to talk about, I tried to get every advantage I could, because you got a lot of other hunters, they kind of shoot everything, so you got to try to be a little bit better than the competition. But about 15 months ago, my life dream happened. I was able to acquire what I call freedom acres. It was 82 acres total, but my core is 64. I've got an 18-acre field that I rent to. I've got a great farmer that's working with me phenomenally in sharing different things and helping me plant. And I'll get into that on my switchgrass going forward. So I live in this town that I went to school in. College was a little bit of ways, but I haven't gone. I'm one of the people that stayed planted where they've been for a long time. Some people head across the country. I pretty much stayed there.
Very nice. Yeah, I mean, Brian and I, we can commiserate with you or agree upon our roots without starting with that huge chunk of property in the family or anything like that. We both had to make it happen ourselves as well, and that's pretty cool. So it's good to see some humble beginnings. And you said you're near Fond du Lac. So are you a walleye fisherman?
Yep. I mean, muskie fishing was my passion for about 20 years, and that's where the lunar periods became huge. Joe Bucher wrote about hunting lunar periods back in the 80s, and that's where I started following the moon and using that for muskie fishing and then deer hunting. So walleyes, absolutely. I mean, Lake Winnebago is a big walleye lake right about a half a mile from where I'm sitting right now. I'm almost right on Lake Winnebago in our office. So yeah, I pretty much walleye, perch here. I don't do as much muskie fishing anymore because with Freedom Acres, that's, as you know, a year-round project. So I didn't even fish much at all this year. My freezer's empty of fish, which is the first time I think in my life.
No, that's awesome. I know what you mean. This habitat stuff is a year-round project, as we all know. And you mentioned Freedom Acres. Well, congratulations on that purchase. You said 82 acres, and you said 64 of it is corn. Is that correct?
64 is my core acreage. 18, it was mainly egg and an old sand mine that had to be reclaimed. And I probably had 6 to 10 acres of cover and bedding, because some of the cover wasn't in a spot where they would bed. Cover 5, 6. So I came in totally the opposite. I was watching your prior podcast of Neil, and he had more woods. I had an open portrait. So the fun thing for me was I was watching every YouTube I could find with all the people drafting up plans. So I'm basically converting 25 acres of egg into habitat and could do whatever I want, which was like a dream. So the total opposite of, I got a hinge cut, I got to clear stuff out. This was like, we need to get to work. So switchgrass, and I can kind of get into that, but I was formulating a plan. And I don't know if you want me to go down that path and then we can talk about lunar, but that's up to you. I'm ready to rumble on freedom if you want to go there and then finish up with the lunar, but however you want me to go.
Yeah. So I had a good bit of tillable on my last farm that I owned, and I was converting some of that into habitat as well. So let's take a little walk down that, what your plans are for that, and what you got going on there.
Yeah, that's definitely my passion. I'll show, and this will be, I guess, for YouTube, I'll show my plan. And first, just to kind of give you a little background, basically for months, my buddy Brad Brockhouse put me into the YouTube channels to say, hey, you got to do that. Here's something to consider. He talked to me about different strategies. So I bounce things back and forth off of him. Well, then after months of dozens of hours, and I'm sure you guys have watched a lot of the same stuff I did from many different people, I formulated a plan. And then, and I would say this to a lot of people out there, even if you've got what you think is a great plan, I was like, gosh, I should have somebody kind of give me their take and see if I'm on the right path versus I think this is, I'm parallel. I'm running my structure parallel to the property line. So I'm not running them into the highway a little ways away or into the neighbors that shoot everything. So I think I had my concepts real good, but I ended up calling Randy Vanderveen from Strategic Habitat, and he is reasonable. I mean, some of these people are, for people that want to spend a lot of money, and that's totally fine. But he was very reasonable. So I said, hey, why don't you come over? So he drafted up a plan for me, and it was pretty much, and I don't remember how we were talking about if I was giving him my thoughts, and he drew up a plan very much in line with what I was thinking, but he had some good things to be thinking about. Add this, don't do this. Matter of fact, 9-bark I had never heard of. So I planted some 9-bark because he said the deer won't eat it, but it still can be good structure. Some areas that I could hinge. I didn't have many trees to hinge, but maybe to force the deer to move one way, some stand locations. So it worked out great, become great friends with Randy. So even if you're out there thinking, I pretty much have this, I think I've got a good plan, it's still a good idea to get somebody like you guys or Randy or someone else that's walked a lot of different properties and have seen things that you only have your own property to go with. So I'll show you this is the laminated plan that he gave me, and I made some tweaks, but it'll kind of give people an idea what it looks like. Trying to describe stuff on the internet is pretty difficult, but in pictorial sense. So I'll show you if that's coming up on my screen here. So this is the 64 that I got the plan for, and this is west. I don't know if this is coming in looking like it's west, but this is west. I'm leaving that whole area. This was all egg here, and I'm leaving some egg down here for now. I just planted, it was corn this year, so I planted some great brassicas and some grains in the open spots kind of around it. And so this is kind of going to be my refuge over here. So I had the farmer come in. That was picked corn last year. And I checked with all different people. What would you do? What would you do? That kind of thing. And what I basically just decided to do, they had a no-till drill. So I had them drill these strips that I had ready to go out there of switchgrass. So again, I'm trying to move the deer east to west, because if I run them north, they're into the shoot anything mode. If I run them south, they're into the highway. So I wanted to keep the deer moving. You're not going to be able to run them in a circle, so to speak, but generally I want to keep them on my property as long as possible. Obviously that's the goal, not to send them off somewhere else. So my switchgrass strips are sending them into where I'll be hunting on this side, but I've left this area totally go. So I've got, I did plant probably 400 trees and shrubs, from spruce pockets to some cedar. They didn't do too good, but red osier, dogwood, 9-bark, plum, the whole 9 yards. But the cool thing is I did switchgrass drilled into picked corn with all the corn duff on there. And they had this giant roller. So they flattened these strips for me, smashed them down, and then we drilled into them. And they got off to a little slow start. The corn duff probably held it back a little, but also it held the weeds back.
Right.
So this is some of the best looking switchgrass I've ever seen on that end. I've got some fails too, but on that end, which we're in that open field, I let the rest of it grow up, and that's got everything you can imagine along with the stuff I planted. But those switchgrass is waist to chest high, beautiful clean stand of Shawnee. And all the middle ones are good. The ones on the lower, on the north and the south, had more of a field edge, got some shade, got more weeds in those. So those might take a couple years, but I think I've already got them bedding up against or in year one. So for anybody that's out there, and guess what I used for chemicals? Zip.
Wow.
None of my switchgrass, no simazine, no. And again, I watched everybody and listened, but I thought, I'm going to try this. I mean, it was a farm field last year. I'm going to give this a shot and see what happens. If it doesn't work, you learn from it and move on. But you wouldn't believe, I don't know if I sent Jared any pictures of it, but I can send you guys some pictures. But that stand of those strips are just gorgeous. I've got drone shots that Seth Gady took for me, and you can just see the winding green switchgrass in there. So anyway, that was very successful, but where there was some shade, I got more weeds. It'll take a little longer. Then I drilled into where they had worked the field up along my road where I wanted screening. I put some Chippewa in there, which is a taller Canadian version of switchgrass. That's supposed to be heavier stalk, taller switch. And that started good, but I've got a bunch of cottonwoods across my lane, and that started to shade it. So it's probably what a normal stand would look like. It's 3 feet tall, mixed with some weeds, a little bit of foxtail. I mowed some of it. So I would say that, based on what I've seen, probably was pretty good. And then
So let me stop you there for a second. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, please do.
The first set of switchgrass strips you were talking about, when was that drilled? What time of the year?
May 20-ish.
Okay. So you've got like several feet of growth just in the first year.
Oh yeah. I mean,
that's impressive.
I did not expect seeding out and waist to chest high and thick.
Okay.
So
yeah. And mentioning not using chemicals, I mean, that's a huge savings there. But what the farmer's doing, spraying his corn the year before, he's basically putting you,
Yep.
time and money ahead with that. So that's one thing we talk about with prepping stuff in the fall and getting things ready. So just want our listeners to be aware of that also.
You bet. And then I also did a strip of so he worked up the field, and I would say where the cornfield was left, that was by far the most successful. Then where they worked up the field and drilled in was second best. Where I broadcast on top of the field that was all clean and worked up, they had everything worked up, and then ran it over with my truck to put the seed in the soil. Again, I did nothing there. I didn't do any weed control. I got some weeds in there. That's probably 2 to 3 feet tall in some pretty crappy soil. It was kind of on a hill, but came in good. The worst results I had were where I frost seeded. And it was coming in pretty good early. And it's probably my fault. I didn't do the simazine because I was like, I'm just going to try it, see what. It wasn't an area that it was so important to have it that I was going to go to every end to make sure it was perfect. I wasn't doing that. Right, and then it got weedy. I mowed some of it, and I would say it was probably my biggest bust. But I put a big wall of sorghum, which I was going to do anyway, there to block my road and my trail entrance in and out. So it wasn't a huge deal. The benefit of, I got lucky, and this is another funny thing with people in weeds, you got to kill every weed, burn it down, everything. I just kind of laugh at it. And I've gotten heat from people on Facebook of, oh, you're anti-chemical or whatever. Well, I got a beautiful stand of giant ragweed, and the bucks love it. The deer love it. It stands up great. And I'm not going to put switchgrass now where I've got the stand of giant ragweed, because I've got about 3 acres, and I mowed a path through there. I passed a real nice buck earlier in October, and he came out perfect. He came out of my, I had an island of giant sorghum in that field where I put the switchgrass because I was impatient. I wanted to have some action in year one. So I had sorghum pods all over that are not on that plan because I didn't just want open field. I wanted to have some action in year one. So he came from that west end where I had those switchgrass strips, walked right in, came in, ate some of my fall crimson clover and tillage radish that I had just kind of scattered, because where I was letting that go natural regen, wherever I saw open soil, I'm like, there's not going to be any open soil out here. So I scattered. Our co-op had a 65-35 crimson clover and tillage radish mix, and then I added some brassicas to it. And in certain areas, it's just gorgeous. So he's eating that stuff right by my blind, and then walked my trail right through the giant ragweed, and then headed right off west of my pond where I've got an alfalfa, clover, chicory, and small burnet mix that's just tall, thick, and lush, and they're all in there. A lot of times at night, that's a little more open area, but that ragweed, I had multiple bucks working through it, sneaking through it, and then going through the trails. So, and I think one of the guys from the deer lab that you've had on, one of the super good guys. Anyway, they talked about giant ragweed and how great in protein it is.
Oh yeah.
When also it's great in cover.
Yeah.
I mean, it's its own cover. So that was a surprise. So I was like, I don't care if the switchgrass grows there. I'm going to let this ragweed stand just keep growing because it's giving me habitat and food, and it was wide open.
Yeah. So the corn is notorious for sucking everything out of the soil. Did you put any fertilizer down after the corn crop was terminated?
Okay. So on the plots, not where I just scattered seed. Where I scattered seed, it was just open ground. You're right. That shouldn't have been very good soil. But the clove, the crimson, and the radishes and stuff came in quite good. Now on my sorghum plots, absolutely, I disced those up, seeded them, and then I had some sunflowers in there. And then I did put some regular fertilizer and then some urea later August. And I'll tell you, I wish I would have done more sorghum. I had that stuff was 14 feet tall. I got it from Kester's here near us in central Wisconsin. But man, to see that island of sorghum. So I've used it for screen, but I used it for some bedding in year one. And I mean, it's amazing. I left it kind of loose. It's a really cool looking. I've put some pictures on Facebook. People can look me up or hit me up if they have any questions on any of this stuff. So I just wish I would have done 3 or more of these islands out there, but I did rim the property in sorghum that was 4 to 8 feet tall. And I've got bucks working those edges and I'm not over hunting it, but they're working those property lines and those edges. So that gave me some action in year one that I maybe didn't have or wouldn't have had if I didn't put the sorghum up, because you're going to have to wait for, I mean, the switchgrass was a surprise. I didn't think that would actually be providing much this late summer and fall.
Sure.
But it has. So I just wanted to make sure of that. So even if you're out there thinking of an egg conversion, use sorghum, use the hybrid stuff, put some, however you want to do it. If you want to bed them somewhere, the one thing about that is you put it wherever you want it,
That's
and it's good for the soil. So yes, I did fertilize that stuff. But the funny thing, you guys were talking soybeans on, I think, your last 1 or 2 podcasts. And I bought 100 pounds of soybeans and I was like, I'm just going to broadcast these things in what I would call my natural regeneration and whatever. I didn't prep the soil, nothing, right on top. Unbelievable. Now we got timely rains. So, I mean, you're not doing this in a drought. But no fertilizer, nothing. I had soybeans growing up all over the place in and around all these little seedlings because I've got thousands of cottonwood, box elder, because at my tree line, that tree line there is cottonwoods and box elder. And some people don't like that either, but wow, do the deer like it. I mean, holy moly, I'm going to have a food plot all year now with, they're already eating it this fall. They've clipped off my cottonwoods and the box elders and the willows. I've got some sandbar willows that I let leak into the field where the farmer had them, was planting the field. I let them come out now and they spread, gosh, I probably got 10 or 15 yards of expansion on the sandbars, and they absolutely mow those things down as well.
So those clumps of trees that you had gotten planted with the pines and spruce, I think you mentioned.
Yep.
Are you doing any type of protection or mowing around them to get sunlight, or how are you managing that?
Okay, great question. They had plenty of sunlight, and then because it was wide open, and then late in the summer, the mare's tail started coming, other stuff started coming. So that could end up being somewhat of a fail. The pines still looked good when I saw them. I haven't been over there because that's kind of off limits right now. I want to keep the deer over there if I can. But I'll have to look at that and see how they did. They were doing great into August. So I bought bigger trees. I'm not young enough to be planting 12-inch trees. So I got 3 to 4 footers. And when we got a 3-week drought in June, I was out watering. So we watered twice all throughout that whole place. I'm like, no way are we going through all this work and not watering. So we kept them going. And the spruce, the Norways overall looked great. My cedar, which, I was going to wrap my cedars in burlap to try to protect them from the deer and the weather. But I looked at them a month ago or so and they were getting a little peaked. So I'll see if they just didn't. I just got 25 of them because I know that people will be like, you're wasting your time. The deer are going to eat them all and whatever. But I wanted to do it. And then I would have just wrapped those because there wasn't a lot in burlap. But otherwise, the red osier dogwood are doing great. They were 4 feet when I bought them. So they're no problem. The deer nip them off and then they grew thicker at the base, which is what I wanted. The plum looked good. The serviceberry looked good. But we'll see, to your point, that stuff did grow in, and then I'll see what I've got. But I've certainly babied them through August to make sure I could get them watered. And I did the same thing. I ran those in that parallel design. So if there's an edge there, they're going to take that edge and stay on the property instead of send them north or send them south. And, we'll see how it goes. If I've got to replant or do more sorghum, if they didn't work, if I can learn from somebody else what to do better, I'll do it. But I definitely spent a little more, bought from a guy that's very reasonable, Bare Roots. I also planted an orchard of 38 apple trees. I planted quite a few chestnuts. Unfortunately, some bucks just creamed some, and it's my fault. I didn't get them. I thought I had them protected enough, but they just trashed, snapped one off, and then I kind of put a camera in a bucket by the other one before. Anyway, I wanted to get quite a few chestnuts in too, and Walmart sells at Chestnut Hills, I think it is, pretty reasonable.
Yep.
Like $50 for big ones. So I got 4 of those, 8 of the mediums, and they were doing great. I got to see what survived the rut, and do a better job of wrapping those bases. And again, those I just put strategically in other areas. I'm not putting them right where I'm hunting, but I wanted to give them just the diversity. I planted so much stuff out there this year for food. I think I've got I probably almost everything you can think of, because wherever I add bare soil, I'm not having bare soil. I disked, I'll show you one cool thing. So I got to see what I'm doing here.
Yeah, and for those of you who are listening and want to see Kurt's map, we'll share it on our media, but this podcast will also have the video version on YouTube, so we can see Kurt, can see his map, can see everything on here that he's talking about, and try to help explain this. And Kurt, while you have that map up again, if you can maybe explain a little bit, just the idea. You said the east to west movement, just one more time so people are grasping kind of your plan via audio, if you could.
Okay, great. So my property runs mainly east to west. There's a block of 50 square, and then there's a piece that's 40 long, but only maybe, meaning 40 acres long, but only probably 100 to 70 yards north to south. So that's where I've got it runs longer than it does taller. So south of me, I've got a highway. I don't want to run my structure into the highway. And then north of me, I've got kind of brown as downers and just more pressure. So I don't want to run them there either. So what I'm doing is trying to bed them on the far west part, which again was an egg field. So I'm putting the switchgrass and then planted the trees to keep them over there. I'm not hunting that. So my goal was to keep them parked there. There's a field to the west of it that's mine that the farmer does. So that'll be corn, beans, wheat, maybe next year. And then park them there. It's going to take a few years, but I am getting some success because I put some sorghum. And then what I wanted to do is have that movement coming to the east. Well, the other good thing about that is having your deer coming east. What's your prevalent wind? So with the west, southwest, west, northwest, south, north, they're coming east. So it's a fortunate setup, but that's the way I designed it. So the prevalent wind is
my 15 acres is the same exact way. Cover on the west and predominantly west, and I do the same exact thing.
Yep. So then I'm basically designing all of the habitat east and west, because again, don't want them going in the road, don't want them going to that neighbor in particular. And then we're running them east and west, and it is starting to work already. And then I've got a pond there, which I put a plot in Kester's drought mix. I think I was just saying it was clover, small burnet, which is a winter food. It's not a highly popular thing, but it's in their mix. They won a contest years ago in standability, protein, and all season. So there's alfalfa, clover, chicory, and the small burnet. And boy, they just annihilated. I planted it last year in July when I bought it, which is obviously the worst thing you could possibly do. But I had to get something in because there's a pitch down to the pond where I was going to get washouts. And it did okay in year one, but absolutely exploded this year. And there's deer trails in there. I took the advice. I only did one light mowing on some of it. And I've seen the debate. You got to mow it. You got to mow your clover. You got to mow this. And then, and his name is escaping me, the really good guy from the Tennessee. You just mentioned him on your last broadcast, the Dr.
Dr. Craig Harper.
Craig Harper, yeah. So they were, and I think Deer Society were saying, no, keep your tonnage, You don't need to mow this stuff. And again, I don't care if people think I'm dumb. That's no problem. It's working because the tonnage is there, the deer are there, and there's trails running through the thing. So I just leave it. I mowed it once because I had some pickers, just about a third of it, but it's absolutely, and I think it's going to be green all winter because of that small brunette, and it's getting hit pretty hard. So that's become a kind of a weird, somewhat evening destination. But generally, my egg fields, which are about 6 and 5 acres or so, those are somewhat destination, but I've got some neighbors that have bigger fields that they can go on to at night. But I've actually found bucks. I've got cameras set all over, and this is kind of crazy, where I've got them over to the west, coming across my culvert. Then they're maybe going through my field and going through one of my neighbors. He's like, oh yeah, I got that buck. Then he's heading north. And then all of a sudden I've got him coming back to the east. Like, again, you're not going to run them in a circle, but it's pretty wild how if you have everything they want and they don't necessarily maybe like the neighbors, or maybe they do, but they don't need to travel too far because I've got so much for them to eat now and I'm building up my cover, that you can just keep them longer, keep them on your property longer. And then I did a last minute, and this will be a little bit tougher on the podcast, but easier on YouTube. I did a last minute 20 to 30 foot disc job around this point. I've got some pine, tall pines, and a little bit of bedding. The little bit of bedding I have on the property, the soil just didn't look very good. There was nothing but weeds growing. So I disced up about a 270-yard food plot trail around that bedding, and mainly, like Randy says, get them to kill time on your property. So it's beautiful wheat, rye, and oats. And I had bad luck with rye only last year. They really didn't care for it. And then I kind of learned they want something sweeter. So I've got this mix of rye, oats, and wheat. And man, they are absolutely killing that. I did put some brassicas, some tillage, and some other things in there as well. But I'm just trying to keep them on the property as long as possible. Obviously, you're not going to keep them there forever. But the goal was to basically, I had an open portrait and create a plan from scratch. And if something goes wrong, like Brian, you were saying, maybe it was a prior podcast I was listening to, or maybe it was Jared, you can just change it. I mean, if that didn't work, okay, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
I don't put too much pressure that this had to be perfect. I'm thrilled with kind of anything that goes well. I'm not, oh, that didn't work. Okay, we'll do that. I got the surprise giant ragweed. That was a bonus. That was free. And I'm not an anti-chemical, but I didn't use 2 gallons of chemical. I sprayed some weeds where I was doing some food plots. The weeds came up, but the result, I did some no-till with buckwheat on my brassica plow, which turned out phenomenal. Other than I had some foxtail I had to kill, and then I went in there with my grain mix, and they just went. They're just crushing that plot because they have. I mean, that's also where I threw the soybeans on top of the soil to sit, just see what happens. And then I got the timely rains. So I've got a plot with soybeans, crimson clover, 8 brassica mix, and then 3 grain mix built in. So and then I've got standing corn. I left standing corn in that corner. So it's a pretty sweet setup. And I'm going to do some more of that buckwheat because I don't want to have to be killing stuff all the time. It's probably not great for the soil. Sometimes you obviously have to do it, but I know there's people that are like, you can't do anything without burning stuff down or whatever, but you can disc it. I disc it too. And some weeds, like Craig Harper says, are not terrible. I don't need a professional plot. And also I've got some volunteer corn that popped up. It gives a little structure, as they're moving through the plot. I also did a softer edge and let some of the weeds and things come out with my crimson clover, like Dr. Deere talks about, rather than have them just plop right into an open field. Then there's some, whether you use switchgrass or just let some stuff grow up. Boy, I've noticed just already that in one of my plots, the bucks are working that thick, just kind of a soft edge. And then I've got clover underneath. There's stuff to eat, but they just, rather than just plump down in an open, they're working that. And last night I had some does just didn't come out into the corn or into the whatchamajigger. They were staying in that little soft transition off the wood line.
Kurt, I have a couple questions for you as you were talking. A couple things that popped into my head here. You may have mentioned it, but how many acres are you keeping in standard corn bean crop rotation? Question 1. Question 2, is the farmer doing that for you, or are you doing that? And then I guess kind of my second part of the question was, what equipment are you working with these days on your freedom makers?
Okay, great questions. I did I did go deep on a tractor. I did buy a 49 horse Kubota I didn't really know what I was going to be into. My farmer is doing all of my corn and bean plantings, and we work out a split arrangement. So maybe rent free for leaving me some stuff, and then I don't have to plant the corn and beans. All of my sorghum and brassicas and all that, all with the Earthway, all by hand. But I do have a disc. I do have a tractor, but seeding, fertilizing, all walking, all by hand. But I think if you have a farmer and you don't have to have all the rental income, oh boy, that's that is so nice, because then the chemical people come in, take care of those fields, so you don't have to worry. Now next year, I'm going to borrow them to do, because they're going to have mainly soybeans, and I need some corn. So I'm going to put some corn into some of my regen areas, and they said, well, we'll disc it up for you, and then I'll have to have somebody plant it, maybe them plant it for me, but I don't think I would have the guys coming to spray like they would, because they're planting it for money. But I'll have to, but they've been great. Like I said, they planted my switchgrass. I did some by hand, but most of it. And the thing is, and I got lucky. I mean, my farmer had a 20-foot no-till drill, but if you can find someone or do it, we got the whole farm planted in, I don't know if it was an hour and a half. And I've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 areas, 10 of whether they're buffers or screening, or where I'm having bedding. So everybody, it is what it is. I was lucky to get someone that, would help me out on that. But I would say right now, to your other question, I converted about 23 into habitat, but I will still have 16, let's say 18, 19, it's a little bit of a guess, of crops. And then of the 64, so what are the 20, 64, 40 something will be habitat. And I may over time do more, take more egg out, but this was a pretty good project, doing 20 something this year. That took every minute that I had. But when you see the results, you want to do more. But of course, I like having food there too. And I got, it's interesting when you talk about regeneration, and every area is different. I'm in a pretty fertile area. We do have sand. I had a sand mine. It's not sandy soil, but underneath the topsoil is a really good sand they use for roads and all kinds of stuff. But the growth that I got from these trees, so the box elders and the cottonwoods that blew off this spring, I mean, I've got thousands of 12 to 18-inch seedlings, and the deer just absolutely, they're even late summer. It's not like, oh, they'll eat those in the winter. They're browsing them all throughout. And then last year there were some washouts in the cornfield the prior year. So I've got some cottonwoods that are waist high to even a little bit higher. And it's just amazing, the food. And if I want, some people would probably say, well, that's going to get too thick and nasty or whatever. Well, I can mow it, cut it, hinge the box elders in time or whatever, but I'm going to have cover with the switch and all these little seedlings, which were free. And I know some areas don't get that, because I've seen open areas that are regeneration and they don't have, I mean, I'm just blessed to have these trees around, feeders, I guess you'd call them, and the soil where they just grow crazy. I mean, 1 year box elders waist high, and they're nipping all those off. So I'll be able to have little wooded clumps that I didn't plan on, I'm guessing 3-4 years or something like that. So that's a long answer to your question about how much do I have left. 20 something of crops yet, but that's up for debate in the future.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I'm picturing your property, and I'm thinking diversity, which is huge, which is awesome. I'm thinking lots of cover, which to me is one of the most important things in these heavily pressured states. And you combine that with proper stand locations, proper access, which is a lot of what we tend to help with on our plans, not just the habitat, but also the access. It seems like you're going to be the random looking property in the area. I'm trying to think of the word I normally use for that, having a mind blank, but
Well, yeah,
You're going to be
it's
that
designed.
outlier. You're going to be the magnet, the attraction, especially in a couple of years. I can't wait to follow along and see where this is at in a couple of years in terms of your cover, your food, your switchgrass. It's only going to get better, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping to figure out how to do it, set up a YouTube channel for Freedom Acres. I'll have to have somebody smarter than me help me out with that. But it is kind of a neat thing because there are people doing conversions. I see them online and maybe they haven't thought about it, but think, geez, I could convert that 10-acre field, 5-acre, whatever, and turn it into something special. I just viewed the ag land as not helpful to me. So I kind of went from wide open, where the guys that hunted it in years past said, as soon as the crops are off, there's no deer anywhere. And now all of a sudden, I've got, I don't know, we saw 12 or 14 antlerless and a couple small bucks last night just milling around, and they're happy because we don't have pressure. And I've got every kind of food this year you can imagine, and the cover's coming. So yeah, I think in 2 or 3 years, it should be really good, but I didn't want to wait 2 or 3 years. That's why, to people out there, sorghum 4 to 8 feet, regular sorghum, that don't just think of that hybrid sorghum as a screening. Use it for year one bedding. Jake Elinger talked about that. I think when he started, he may have done that because I think he had his property was a lot of field conversion. And I mean, it's 30 something years old. Yeah. So I kind of also modeled my thought process off of that. But if I wouldn't have done any sorghum, it would have been a little trickier because, like I said, the deer are already working the edges of it. And the cool thing is, in central Wisconsin, they don't know what it is. So I think they'll start eating it in December, but the blackbirds have had a field day, but the seed heads are still intact. And when Grant Woods talks about his is gone at the end of August, they wipe his out. I'm like, no, they haven't done anything with mine, but I'm like, I thought that would be the case because they don't know it. So I think that was the same with brassicas, but some neighbors have planted brassicas for enough years where they're pounding the brassicas, so they know them. But it's going to be fun to watch, and I'll share along with when are they going to start eating those seed heads? Is it going to be December, January? I have no idea. I'm glad they haven't eaten them because it'll give me some more winter food sources, and it's providing cover. What a nice double thing you get for it, and it's good for the soil.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. Plus, I use it for screening while my switchgrass matures, right? So you have this year, like you mentioned, not wanting to wait. And I had a doe on her hind legs reaching up to the top of trying to get that sorghum seed head about probably 2-3 weeks ago on camera. She's standing up like a human, trying to get
awesome.
the top, get that seed head. So to your point, you're right on there. And it's a great thing to use while your switchgrass matures. I can't wait to continue to follow along. I think please keep us posted, and Brian has our video series going where guys like you are keeping us posted on their projects throughout the habitat journeys. So that's pretty awesome. And is there anything else you wanted to cover on Freedom Acres?
No, we can park that, and people can look me up on Facebook or hit you up, and you can hook them if they have any other questions. I'd be happy to help. But yeah, we can go lunar now, because I could go on for Freedom for forever.
All right, well, going lunar now. We're going lunar. It sounds kind of cool when you say that. Going lunar.
Yeah.
So you had a comment on, I think it was maybe my buck picture or something about lunar, the moon, and you caught my. I started asking a couple questions and thought, man, I'd love to learn more about that because I've heard a couple podcasts on it way back when. I know a couple of guys swear by it that I know, and then other people don't pay any attention to it. So I thought, you know what? Let's get Kurt on here. Let's go lunar, talk about the moon and how it affects our hunting and our habitat. So why don't you kick us off?
Okay.
Get us the basic understanding of what lunar periods are, so we maybe have the terminology down and a good starting.
Sure. And I'll keep it simple because it can get kind of hairy when people are, now there's the red moon, this moon, that, and whatever. I've been following it for, since the 80s, and a phenomenal muskie success, just planning my vacations, muskie fishing around these lunar periods. So it's not something I just discovered last week or a month ago. Well, then I started using it in my deer hunting. So the interesting thing, just some editorial comments about the moon, it seems like you either have to be all in and it's the greatest thing ever, or it's stupid, it has no effect, studies have been done, blah, 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 whatever. Well, there's always room in between. So the bottom line is that if you go to like huntfishsport.com, there's all kinds of places you can find, you've heard of major periods, minor periods, fishing, hunting, that kind of thing. It all revolves around moon rise, moon set, high moon, low moon. That's it. So there can be major periods when the moon is underfoot, straight underneath us, straight up above us. And then one of my favorites, because we've had phenomenal action, is when moonrise and sunset are happening within like a half hour. I got to be careful not to get on too many tangents, but I'll just for now leave it there. So if you've done this for 30 years and had success, it works. If you've never done it, and some of these people are like, oh, that's stupid, it doesn't work, don't pay any attention to the moon, it has no effect whatsoever. If there's a 90-degree day, the moon isn't going to help you, and if it's a cold front, you should be out in the woods anyway. Well, last time I checked, the middle ground is pretty common. A lot of times we have normal weather, right? We're not in 90 degrees or 20. We spend a fair amount of time in the hunting season in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And what I will say is these lunar periods are tremendous when you don't have major weather. If you have a major thunderstorm, 50-mile-an-hour winds, I'm not going out because it's my perfect lunar time. Okay, forget it. If it's 90 degrees, I'm not going out because it's my favorite lunar time. However, I'll tell you this, early season, there's usually a moonrise sunset for us the first week of the season. So if you guys start in October, your full moon is going to be a little bit later, but I have had absurd big buck activity when we have little to nothing. And then 3 days later, when we're hunting, I just call them lunars. I mean, that's my lunar periods. And then all of a sudden, 5 years ago, I saw the biggest buck of my life, 21, I figured inch, 12 point, perfect 10, thick, tall, chandelier. We don't get bucks like that ever. 35 years, it's the biggest buck I've ever seen. And split G2s, it would have been something, and I almost killed him. That's a different unfortunate situation. Didn't shoot, but I almost got him. But anyway, on this perfect lunar period, he's the first guy out of the swamp. He's got a 3-year-old behind him and a yearling. My dad shot a beautiful 3-year-old that day. So we had little to no action before. After, you could say, well, that's because you shot that, because you got that one or whatever. And my dad shot the biggest buck of his life on a Tuesday night, and that was about 75 degrees, that biggest buck I've ever seen, first buck out of the swamp. My dad shot the biggest buck of his life. I watched him shoot it, which was absolutely incredible. I'll never forget it. A different property, low density, not a very good spot. Barely ever seen multiple bucks. We had 5 bucks in the field, in an alfalfa field. And I'll never forget, as we're dragging this big guy comes out right, probably 40 minutes before dark. So it wasn't even right at dark. And this was a 20-inch 10-pointer, beautiful, beautiful buck. He came out early to check, and there's all these deer in the field. We've never seen that many deer in the field before or after. And he was out early. And again, it was warm. There was no weather. It was stable. So my best advice and best action is, which again, we have stable weather, I think more than we don't. So the lunar periods, if you're out in a stable, now the weather's going to warm up next week, and we got a new moon today. Today's a great day to be out. There's a good lunar, I think, going on right now, actually. High moon. I think some of the red moon guys are on their stand right now.
Yeah, buddy, I'll be out with you.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It seems like the haters of the moon say cold fronts are all that work, and if it's 90, who cares what the moon is? Again, most of our time is in between there. So I would say early season, I've got the buck in my office in a warm later October full moon period. And again, if you don't like it, don't do it. Don't do it. I don't understand the hate for the moon. If you want to follow it and do it, if you've been doing it for 30 years and you say it doesn't work, fine, no problem. But the people that are cranked up on the moon have had success. Otherwise, they're not. Yeah. I'm not selling anything. Most lunar guys are not. I guess one guy is selling a wheel or something. But most guys following it are not selling anything. They're just saying, look. And to me, if there's 2 people on the podcast that try it and one has success, just look at those periods. Again, you can find them. And let's say you're thinking about quitting and you're on your stand and there's maybe a major lunar period coming based on the charts you find on the moon rise, moon set, high moon, low moon, and you stay out an extra hour and all of a sudden you got one.
Right.
Or
Right.
you go a day you're thinking, it's kind of borderline weather. It's not 90 degrees, but let's say, I think Sunday we're supposed to have 60. That's not maybe great, but if it was a great lunar period, maybe you say, well, the Bucks are moving, I'll give that a shot, versus saying it's too warm, I'm staying home.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think that's a reflection of our society when you have these polar opposites now. It's kind of hard to be a guy in the middle now. You have to pick a side, or you're demonized by one group or the other, right?
Yeah. I put this is, and Jared might have seen this. I put on Habitat, the Habitat chat on Facebook. I had a great lunar hunt. Now, do you think I knew that there was absolutely going to be, I've never had more comments. I didn't think that chat was even alive until I put that in there. And all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, 80, 100, oh, that's totally been disproven or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
And then other people are absolutely, I follow it, to a T. But to me, if you don't want to do it, don't do it.
Right.
I hope none of my neighbors do it.
Well, let me ask your opinion, because I've talked to not just a handful of guys like you that pay a lot of attention to it, but hundreds and maybe even thousands. And there's probably more out there that I haven't heard from. So you've got to say a university or somebody that's a lot smarter than us that does research on this, and they say absolutely has no effect. We've got the data here. What is it about the thousands of other people that do have the data that show that they are seeing results on that? Why do you think that is?
Thank you for asking that. I think that is a phenomenal question, and their results, I think, prove what we're saying. They say the same thing about weather. So the deer aren't moving more, we're getting them in daylight, and that's all we care about. So the studies that are out there, well, they're not moving anymore or whatever, I don't need them to move more. That doesn't mean they have to run around cheering about a moon. The fact is that giant buck my dad shot, that giant one that I saw, came out early season. He's a mature, he was never on, I never got him on camera the whole season. So something happens with the moon. He would have been on his feet, whether it was dark or daylight, right? With that study, let's say he was collared and he took that same route at 8 p.m. They would say, well, he didn't move anymore with the moon. No, but guess what? He came out when I could shoot him, because of the moon, in my opinion. If nobody wants to believe me, I really don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me whatsoever. But I think those studies, can even make our point, because I actually made a comment on the National Deer Association, I believe that's what it's called. They just did a big thing on this, to your point, and said, moon, no difference. We radio colored. Weather, no difference. And my question to them was, you should have done it for daylight activity, because King's Calendar, which is in my office, that has best days to hunt, they've done thousands and thousands and thousands of sits around. This isn't like fake news. I mean, this is real people hunting and following it. We're not doing it because it's dumb. We're doing it because we think we can get a big buck. So I actually think those studies, I guess if you follow them to a T, and there's one guy, very prestigious, that thinks the moon has no effect, but the weather has all the effect. But that same study that says the moon has no effect says the weather has no
Correct.
effect.
Correct.
So you can't have it both ways.
Right.
I say, do what you want out there, but I think they don't have to be more active than they would have been, but give me the daylight. And that's what I'm seeing is bucks coming out way earlier, big ones that shouldn't be out unless the moon phase was right. And that's why I do it. I'm not doing it because, well, geez, I'm just going to go there and it's never worked 20 years in a row. Let's see if it does in year 21.
Kurt, why is that? Break it down for me. Do the bucks think that it's already dark? I mean, they can see. Nope. They know light or dark. Like what? Why? Break it down for me. Simple, stupid. Why you think that the rising moon during the sunset time gets them to get off their bed and come out earlier than normal?
That's a question for a smarter person than me. The fish are more active. I've had muskie action like you would not believe, and then the lights turn out after these windows. So I don't know the tides with the moon. I don't have the scientific background. All I have is these bucks are moving, and that's all I care about. So I'm not sure. Some scientist probably could answer your question. What I mean, they say humans.
Yeah, I hear you.
You have more people go into the ER, or they're crazy during the lunar periods and stuff. I mean, it's not like an unknown thing, but I don't know if it's people say it's a gravitational pull because the moon's coming up and whatever. That very well could be. I necessarily don't care. It's just that and they're not because it's dark. No way they're thinking it's dark. It is that, and maybe it's a gravitational force. That probably makes the most sense. but I would argue it's totally provable. And Brian, you've talked to people. I mean, ultimately, we don't really care if anybody believes it.
Right.
We're not selling you to believe it. It's
Yeah.
happening. And my point is to people out there, try it. If it doesn't work, and again, don't try it on a 90-degree day or go out there when it, if you're using it for fishing during a nasty cold front. When I have stable weather, both for the muskies, that's when we had phenomenal results, and for the deer. And again, stable weather, last time I checked, fairly common. If
Yeah.
you only hunt cold fronts the first 2 days after a cold front, hell, last season you'd have been in not very fun. We had a hot rut. I mean, it was
Yeah.
warm during the season. So then try to expand your horizons and get into something a little bit more, another arrow in your quiver. That's all it really is just adding something to your arsenal. If you don't like it and you think a study says it doesn't work, that's congratulations. No problem.
Yeah, and that's why I want to get you on, because I just want people to consider these things, right?
Absolutely.
Like that podcast we did, 149.5, about October indicators. This is an indicator. This is something to consider while you're going over your trail cameras, while you're looking at last year's pictures, while you're looking at the weather. I shot my buck that on the 17th. That moon was high in the sky before I got there.
Of October. Yeah, that
October
was right.
17th.
Yep. Because my birthday is right near there, and there was a full moon. Was it the 19th, 20th, something like that? So, and the other thing to keep in mind, if you keep it this simple, 2 to 3 days before and after.
That was my next question. I wanted to ask, when you hunt around a full moon and a new moon, what are the differences maybe? And then what days do you hunt around those?
Yep. So the day of is today. We have a new moon today. That's how exciting is that for some? Some don't care because it doesn't have any impact. But otherwise, the day of a full or a new, and then the 2 before and 2 after, if you narrow it down to that, those days, and then because the rest of the days, there's always major and minor periods of activity or fishing times, hunting times, they call them. But for me, I'm focusing on the new, the full, the day of, and the 2 before and the 2 after. And if you get bad weather, on a couple of the days, wait and then hit it the days, that you have better weather. But we've got some warm weather, biggest bucks we've gotten, when supposedly that's not when you're supposed to be out in the woods. But the only thing I could attribute to is the lunar is in those 2 cases, it was full moon. And I think the one I got in my office here was also an October full moon. But yeah, so keep it simple. Moonrise, moonset, high moon, low moon. You can find that stuff almost even in Weather Underground. Most people use Weather Underground. That'll give you moonrise, moonset right on the day there. And if nothing else, like I said, if you're debating on whether to go or not go, give it a shot. If you're debating on staying or leaving, and maybe there's a moonrise coming in another half hour and you don't have anywhere to go, stay in and see what happens. But definitely stable weather is where it has its biggest impact, because also then you can't say, well, it was just the weather. Well, if it's not changing for 3 or 4 days, it's stable. Then what made this buck come out early that he shouldn't be coming out? He's the biggest buck in the property. And I've seen it time after time. So it is, it's not a fluke. And obviously, like Brian said, there's hundreds there. I'm not alone, but to some, it's hard to explain. Maybe I say, keep it simple. The new, the full, 2 before, 2 after, and then the rise, the set, the high, the low. You don't hunt them all, but that's where, if you look at any of these hunting times, they're all going to revolve around that. That's what it is. But early season, I think a lot of people miss the boat, because that's where you can have some great lunar activity, and there is no other weather that's going to, yes, if you get a cold front, I get that. But a lot of times you have warm weather early season. So then if you've got a major lunar come in, that could be the thing. Maybe that big buck who would have come out after dark sneaks out half hour, 45 before dark, and boom, you get them. If you get one, it's worth it, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth considering. And I think I listen to a lot of guys, like Brian said, smarter than us, who follow this stuff. And that's why I wanted to have you on. Now, go one more time. Tell us where we can go to find some of this information for our own liking, if we want to consider it in the future.
Sure. So huntfishsport.com has, actually, they'll star the days from 0 to 5 stars. And then they'll also put major, minor, meaning the real hot one, which like right now is the high moon. That particular one, the high moon, and you've got a new moon, and it's during the rut and all that. So that would be a big thing. So huntfishsport.com actually gives you the current month best days, 1 through 5 stars, 0 stars. So that is going to be always based around new and full moon. That their 4 and 5 star days are only going to be on or right after the new and full moon. And then the periods all revolve around rise, set, high, low. So when they've got a major morning, a major evening, you're going to be around one of those 4. A minor morning, a minor evening are going to be around one of those 4 positions. And I know Jake Elinger has talked about that, the position of the moon. But sometimes it just gets lost. If you just think of it, look at your calendar, new moon, full moon. If you can, my favorite is the moonrise, sunset, and that's going to be coming up in November again. Moonrise, sunset, and that's also a good time to hunt. But like now you can get more daytime movement. So you could get periods now midday that could act. And I think a lot of those guys that are following the red moon, I think that's what they're calling that, the red moon, are out right now because they got the high moon. And like by us now, we have stable weather. So I would expect probably people to have some good midday action. And again, someone could say, who cares? It's the rut that has no impact. That's okay. That's no problem. It's no difference.
Yeah.
Whatsoever.
Yeah. Now, do you have any other timely rut hunting information that you want to share with the listeners before we close this down? It's early November. We're gonna get this out there for the listeners right away so they can make their judgment calls on this. And what else do you have before we button this up?
Okay, great. And probably nothing, now we're into the stuff that a lot of people I'm sure follow, but for what it's worth. So I think your buck you killed, my buck I killed was a little before the madness started around on Monday. The bucks were still patternable. Now, because I still have been going with my dad lately, now it's a little bit more of a free for all. So in central Wisconsin, and I've talked to some people who aren't seeing anything, which they probably maybe don't have food, maybe don't have mature bucks, but it's blown up by us. They're running all over the place. Now it's obviously a little more random. So I'm hunting doe trails to hope that the bucks bringing the doe toward me, because otherwise you can get frustrated. Oh, I saw a big buck over there yesterday, over there, and I'm going back over here. So we're mainly hunting, early season doe trail activities, but in central Wisconsin, it's white. It's Katie bar the doors. They're running pretty good. And again, I'm talking to people also that aren't seeing anything. I think that depends on your area. Maybe we had an early hot doe, but the bigger bucks are definitely on their feet. Started probably, well, actually for me, it started even before the cool front because that warmer weather on Saturday. But this week they're moving. So I would just say hunt where you think those are coming to food, or in the morning, a transition where they're maybe passing through. But the bucks are moving. I don't know about by you guys, but they're definitely a lot of activity.
Yep, you are right about that. I was down in Ohio getting daylight pictures of shooter bucks in Michigan. So I'm in the vehicle. I'm going to the property. We're going to hopefully see if all this info can hold true one more time for me. So, Kurt, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for coming on and being a loyal listener of the podcast. We truly appreciate it and hope to hear more from you in the future.
Well, you guys are great. If I added anything, I'll be happy for it. But thanks for giving me the opportunity. And I'll keep you posted on my Freedom Acres plan because it might be able to help some people that are doing some conversions and kind of starting from scratch.
Please do. And good luck the rest of this fall, buddy.
You guys too. Take care and keep doing great work.
Thanks, Kurt.